prays, and he's praying about, so if you remember, the time in captivity is going to be, well, Jeremiah prophesied it'd be 70 years. They're in year 68 at this point, so Daniel realizes it should be about to come to conclusion. This is when the Medes and Persians initially take over, destroy Babylon, and he kind of perceives that may be the inciting event that leads to the Israelites being able to go back home to Judea, and so he prays for that and for Jerusalem and so forth. And so he sees this vision, and in the vision here at the end, he's going to get sort of this explanation that the gist of it is that, yes, the Jews will go home, the temple will be rebuilt, the city will be rebuilt, but that's not really the main thing. And so that's kind of where we left off last week. So kind of to quickly look again at verse 24, he starts talking about a 70-week period of time. And we talked briefly last week about people that try to make it a literal 70 weeks or a 70 times 7, which is 490, whether it's weeks or years or whatever scheme you want to use. The timeline it never really works out. And so that always causes problems, and there's ways they try to dance around the problems, but that creates more problems, and I don't really want to bore you with all those details. So the long and short of it is the 70 weeks is not really intended to be a literal time. It's intended to be, plays off the number 7, which is a completion or a complete period of time. It also plays off the number 70 from Jeremiah when he mentioned that they'd be in captivity for 70 years. And it plays off a little bit of other numerology too. But the idea is it's not literal. It's intended to represent a completion of a period of time. And so what he's going to do is he's going to start with 70 weeks. And in the next few verses, he's going to break the 70 down into smaller numbers that still add up to 70. All right, so kind of with that in mind, verse 24, it says 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city. So he's saying that something's going to happen to both the people and Jerusalem during this 70-week time frame. He says to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. So what he's really saying here is that yes, the people will go home, they will rebuild the city, but something more significant than that is going to occur in the city, and that is the Messiah is going to eventually come, and when he comes, he is going to make reconciliation for iniquity. He's going to bring about everlasting righteousness. He will seal up vision and prophecy, which means after he comes, or at least after the completion of this 70 weeks, there will be no more prophecy. So once he comes, and obviously we know the apostles had some prophecy and so forth beyond that, but they're factored into this 70-week time frame. Once that 70-week time frame is over, there is no more prophecy, which is what that means when he says it's going to be sealed up. And then it says that they'll anoint the most holy, which means the Messiah will come and be anointed. So all that is pointing towards telling Daniel, you know, you're praying about the city, you're praying about the temple, and that is an honorable and right thing to do. But he is being told that he needs to look beyond that there's something greater than the city and the temple that he needs to be looking forward to and thinking about, and that's the idea behind this. So with that in mind, we'll pick up now in 25. And I may read this out of the ESV because I have a lot of tiny, tiny notes written here in my little ESV copy that I cannot read if I have to go back and forth. Verse 25, it says, "Know therefore and understand that from the going out of the word," and that can mean a couple different things. The going out, it might refer to God prompting the decree of Cyrus in 538. So the going out of the word might be God persuading Cyrus to issue the decree to let the people go home. It might refer to God telling Gabriel to go talk to Daniel, or it may even be Daniel's prayer itself. So it's kind of hard to know exactly what that's referencing. But it says the going out of the word to restore and build Jerusalem to the coming of an anointed one. So there is going to be the restoration and rebuilding of Jerusalem and the temple, but the purpose of that is what? The purpose is for the coming of an anointed one, which is the Messiah. So the whole point of rebuilding the city and rebuilding the temple is not for the sake of rebuilding the city and the temple. The point of it is so that the Messiah can eventually come into the city and will there be offered as a sacrifice. So it says, a prince there shall be 7 weeks. So prince here means a leader, and here the prince is referring to the Messiah. Okay, so he's saying that will be 7 weeks. So what he's going to do is he's going to take that 70 and break it down into 7, and then another number, and then a third number. And those numbers will add up to 70. So the first 7 weeks, there's a lot of ways you can break this up to. The one that maybe made the most sense to me, but not saying it's 100%, not definitely correct, but the 7 weeks would be from the time that Cyrus gave the decree to let the Jews go home until Nehemiah completes the walls of Jerusalem. So that would be 538 to 445. So that would be that first 7 weeks is the time frame it takes to rebuild the city and rebuild the temple. Okay. All right. So it says then for 62 weeks. So obviously 7 plus 62 is 69. So it says for 62 weeks it shall be built again with squares and moat, but in a troubled time. So the troubled time is going to refer to the Hellenistic era, which includes the time frame that Antiochus Epiphanes is around, which is 167 to 164. So we've been talking about him for several weeks. So this whole time frame of this 62 weeks is going to contain a lot of troubled time for the city, the temple, the people, and so forth. So the 62 weeks is generally thought of as the time between the building of the walls, so when Nehemiah completes the walls, up until kind of the time around Jesus' birth, basically. So that time frame is the 62 weeks. So if you notice, these times don't really work out to 1 week or 62 weeks or 7 weeks. And so the numbers on their surface don't really add up to anything specific. They just represent time frames, basically. Let's see. So after the 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off, meaning the Messiah will be crucified, and shall have nothing, meaning that once he's crucified, everybody's going to abandon him initially. Okay, so he'll have nothing initially after he's crucified. And it says, and the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. So this prince is going to be referring to the Roman devastation of the city. And this happens twice. We know about Titus destroying the city in AD 70. They're actually going to destroy it again in AD 135. So that's when Hadrian's going to come in later and destroy it again. So in AD 70, when Titus destroyed it, he did kill a lot of the Jews, but they didn't force the Jews to evacuate. But when Hadrian comes back in 135, he's going to ban Jews from even entering the city. He's going to rename the city, so it's no longer be called Jerusalem. It's going to be called Aelia Capitolina, and he's going to erect a temple to Jupiter in the city. Okay, so that's kind of the final Roman straw with the city of Jerusalem, and that's in 135 AD. And then, so keep going there in 26. It shall come with a flood, meaning a military conquest is what the flood represents. And to the end there shall be war. Okay, so that means the end here is going to mean that it's when God is going to basically bring an end to his relationship between the city and the people. And that's what that end is referring to. So all the way up till the end occurs, there's going to be war with the city. And it says desolations are decreed, and he, meaning the Messiah, shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week. So this is your last week. So we've had 7, 62, and now 1, and those all add up to 70 collectively. So it says, and to the end, and he, the Messiah, verse 27, shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week, and for half of the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. So the Messiah is going to eliminate the need for sacrifice and offering because he is the final sacrifice. So once Jesus is sacrificed as the final sacrifice, there is no more need for sacrifice at the temple, and that's what that's referencing. Midway through verse 27, and on the wing of the abominations shall come one who makes desolate, until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. And so that again is referring to Rome. Rome's going to come in, bring in abominations, desolate the city, and all this is going to keep going until the one causing the desolation is put to an end as well. When that's referring to when the Roman Empire will eventually fall. Okay, and so, however, once the Roman Empire does fall, the Antichrist and persecution of the church will keep going even beyond that. But it's talking about the Roman Empire here. So the 70 weeks as a whole is really just talking about the time frame from when Daniel is hearing it and it encompasses the time that the city will be rebuilt, the temple will be rebuilt, all the way up until the time when the Messiah comes, puts an end to a need for the temple, and then the temple is eventually destroyed. And that's really what this whole 70 weeks is about. And that's why you can't really make it literal, because any kind of schematic you use to try to make it literal, it just doesn't work out. The numbers don't really work out. So it's a figurative number. It's not a literal number. And that's the end of chapter 9. Does anybody have any comments or questions on 9? Okay. All right, verse 10 through 12 is going to start a whole new section. This is all one vision, so the whole rest of the book is the final vision that Daniel's going to see. And this vision is the only vision that he receives after the people start going back to Jerusalem. So this does occur after that point. So if you look in verse 1, it says, in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a message was revealed to Daniel, whose name was called Belshazzar. So I'm going back to the New King James now. All right, so this year, this is going to be 536 BC. Now he's going to tell you a more specific date, a couple verses down, but I'll just go ahead and tell you. So the date for that he receives this is April 23rd, 536 BC. Okay. So the people started going back in 538 BC. This is now 536 BC. Now Daniel doesn't go back with them. He stays in what used to be Babylon. Now it's Medo-Persia. Probably because he was too old to go back. Remember, when the Medes and Persians conquered Babylon, he's kind of in probably like his mid-80s, and that's the travel he wouldn't want to make, even if he wanted to make it at that age. And so he doesn't go back. But he's going to pray for what's happening in the city. But that's the year. So some of the Jews have already returned home at this point. Okay, so continuing on in verse 1, it says, the message was true, but the appointed time was long, and he understood the message and had understanding of the vision. And that means that he's starting to put together some of the details from the previous visions. Now that things are playing out, some of it's starting to make more sense to him. Obviously, some of it was explained to him at the time, but now in retrospect, even more of it's starting to kind of make sense to him. So it says in verse 2, in those days I, Daniel, was mourning 3 full weeks. I ate no pleasant food, no meat or wine came into my mouth, nor did I anoint myself at all till 3 whole weeks were fulfilled. So what he's doing is he's mourning. But why is he mourning? And so this, like I said, this is after some Jews have started going back to Jerusalem. He may be mourning because, if you remember in the previous chapter, his prayer was about the city and about the temple and being able to go back. And now some of them are going back, but what may be happening is he may be getting reports back that the people are not rebuilding the temple. Okay, so they've started to go back. But if you remember from Ezra and Nehemiah, they kind of don't really jump into the work initially like they should have. And so he may be mourning as a result of that. And so as you look at it, he mourns 3 weeks. And it doesn't explicitly say this, but you can work out the time frames and know this. This is actually during the time of the Passover that he is mourning, okay? Since it tells you the exact date, I think in verse 4 here in just a second. This would be when the Passover was occurring. So the fact that he doesn't eat any meat during this time means he doesn't celebrate the Passover. He doesn't eat the Passover lamb. And he's praying the whole time. He is mourning, and he doesn't anoint himself, which means he doesn't put oil on himself, which was just part of a normal daily hygiene routine. So he's not doing kind of basic daily maintenance on himself. He's mourning, he's fasting, he's praying, he's doing these kind of things. So he's obviously upset about whatever he has heard. Presumably it has something to go with what's going on in Jerusalem. All right, so verse 4, it says, now on the 24th day of the first month, that's where you know the day comes from. It says, I was by the side of the great river, that is the Tigris. Why is he by the Tigris? It doesn't say, so I don't know. Might be there for some government reason because he's still working for the Medo-Persian government at this time. It says, I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose waist was girded with gold of Uphaz. His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like torches of fire, his arms and feet like burnished bronze in color, and the sound of his words like the voice of a multitude. Actually, I'll read the next verse or two, and then we'll go back. So it says, and I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, for the men who were with me did not see the vision, but a great terror fell upon them, so that they fled to hide themselves. So if you look at verse 7, he's with other people, but he's the only one who sees it, but the other ones know something is going on. And that's very reminiscent of Saul on the road to Damascus, right? Same thing occurs. They hear something, but they don't know what they're hearing. Only Saul, Paul, whatever you want to call him, only he really understood what was being said. And so it's the same idea here. Daniel is with other people, but he's the only one who sees, but the other ones know something's going on, and they're afraid as a result of it. Now, if you back up, let's look at the description of the person who is giving this message to him. And you kind of have to ask yourself, who is this guy as you read this? It says, beginning of verse 5, a certain man clothed in linen. So the linen there is representative of the high priest's garments. It says, whose waist was girded with gold of Uphaz. A gold belt was symbolic of like royal authority. His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, which meant power. His eyes like torches of fire, which represents wrath. His arms and feet like burnished bronze in color, and the sound of his words like the sound of a multitude, or you might have a translation that says something like sound of armies, which means obviously he has great power. And so these same concepts, and actually some of them are very verbatim, are also in Ezekiel chapter 1, verses 4 through 28, and Revelation 1, chapters 13 through 16. And in both of those instances, it's referring to the Messiah. Okay, or obviously in Revelation, we know it's Christ himself. So when you kind of piece that together, the things that are being said here, but then when you correlate it with Ezekiel and with Revelation, it seems to strongly suggest that this is Christ who is talking to him and delivering this message to him. So far he's only been talking to Gabriel, Now this last vision is a different ballgame. You got somebody else a little more significant than Gabriel showing up. Not that Gabriel's not significant, but it's a whole new level here. Okay, so this is going to be Christ, most likely Christ, talking to Daniel for basically the rest of the book. Okay. All right, so as he's going to talk to him, the people around Daniel are afraid. And then in verse 8, we'll pick back up. It says, "Therefore I was left alone when I saw this great vision, and no strength remained in me, for my vigor was turned to frailty in me, and I retained no strength." And so we've seen in previous situations where when he sees a vision, he usually reacts like this, where he falls on his face, or he's drained of his energy, or he's sick for days after the fact. This one, he almost doesn't react as severely, but maybe he's not reacting as severely because he's already in a weakened state. He's been fasting for 3 weeks, so he's not probably vigorous to begin with. So, but obviously it is going to affect him greatly physically. And so that is typical of what happens to a human when they're in the presence of deity or angelic beings. They're usually greatly affected by the experience, okay? All right, so verse 9, it says, "Yet I heard the sound of his words, and while I heard the sound of his words, I was in deep sleep on my face, with my face to the ground." So he does a face plant like he has done several times before as a result of being in the presence of whoever this individual is, presumably Christ. All right, so verse 10, it says, "Suddenly a hand touched me, which made me tremble on my knees and on the palms of my hands." So the person talking to him, which is presumably Christ, realizes Daniel is reacting this way, that he is drained of all of his energy. He's probably a little bit scared. And so he's going to touch him, and in the process of touching him, that gives him his strength back so that he can carry out the role that God has appointed him for. Now, the exact same thing happens in Revelation. When John sees the vision, Christ touches him as well to restore him so that he can carry on, okay? So the same idea occurs in some other situations. All right, verse 11, it says, "He said to me, O Daniel, man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak to you and stand upright, for I have now been sent to you." So, like in the previous chapter, Daniel is once again told that he is greatly loved. In this case, presumably the words are coming from Christ himself, okay? Now, he is speaking on behalf of the Father, so this individual says he is sent, so the implication is the Father told Christ to go speak to Daniel, okay? So the idea is that he's being told he's loved by both Christ and the Father. And so I would think that would have to be very emotional to hear that. But the thing is we're told in Scripture that all of God's people are beloved by God. So the same thing applies to us, whether we hear it audibly and directly ourselves or not. We have been told the same thing, okay? So I'm sure it would be very emotional to hear it directly like this from Christ, but through Scripture we are told the same thing. So something for us to kind of all keep in mind, how much God really does love us. All right, so he informs them that he's been sent to him, and then it says, "While he was speaking this word to me, I stood trembling." So after he face planted, he's now been given some strength back, and he's able to stand back up. All right, so that's kind of the starting scene here. So keep going now. In verse 12 it says, "Then he said to me, 'Do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard.'" And so what he's saying is, when this is occurring now, so he began praying and fasting, and that lasted 3 weeks. So now we're 3 weeks down the road when he sees the vision. But what the speaker here presumably Christ, and I'm going to quit saying presumably Christ because that gets old if I say that every time. I'll just say Christ, and if you don't think it's Christ, then just think whoever you want to think it is. An angel is really your only other option, but anyway. So Christ was basically telling him that the moment you started praying, God heard that, and God knew, okay? And God actually at that moment started setting events into action. You just didn't know it was happening. And so the takeaway message for us is sometimes we start to pray about something, and we think, well, gee, I haven't heard an answer yet. I guess there's no reason to keep praying about this. Well, in this situation, it took 3 weeks before any answer came. But that didn't mean God didn't start the process of answering it the very moment you started to pray the prayer. It just took 3 weeks before you to see any results of it, okay? But what God, through Christ, is telling him is the moment you started to pray, I started setting the wheels in motion, and things started to happen. But the other important thing to see here is that these things started to take place because, one, Daniel prayed, but two, because he was humble. And he humbled himself before God. And those are the things that led to God responding to the prayer. So it says, your words were heard, and I have come because of your words. Now, he's going to tell you why there's a 3-week delay here, okay? And it says, because the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me for 21 days. And behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left alone there with the kings of Persia. Now, he's using phrases like princes and kings and things like that. What are these really? These are demons, or if you like the term fallen angels better, we'll go with that. What he is saying is, and he's going to reveal a little bit more of this in a minute, but what the idea is this. In 538, the Medes and Persians defeated the Babylonians, and Darius or Cyrus, whichever name you want to call him, makes the decision to let the Jews go back to Jerusalem. Now, Darius doesn't know the reason behind that. The reason behind going back to Jerusalem and rebuilding the temple, as we just saw in the previous chapter, is not really to rebuild the temple or rebuild the city. It's to establish the city and the temple so that the Messiah can come and be sacrificed. Now, the Jews don't really know that right now, nor does Darius know that either. But God influenced Darius to make that decision so he would let the Jews go back. But what you're also finding out here now is the moment Darius made that decision, Satan said, nah, we're not going to let this be that easy, okay? So Satan sends demons, fallen angels, whatever you want to call them, to Persia to start trying to thwart the process. And so he sends them there to try to influence the political leaders and the influential people of Persia to stop letting the Jews go back. So Jesus is telling Daniel, I've been fighting against this with spiritual warfare. Here he says 21 days, but in a minute he's going to tell you 3 years, okay? What he's saying with the 21 days is for the last 21 days, once you said that prayer, this is what I've been doing. This is why I couldn't come to you, because I've been fighting this battle against these fallen angels who are trying to prevent the Jews from going back to Jerusalem. And what he tells you is that he's fighting this fight by himself, okay? And it's the same idea. How many people fought the fight against Satan when Jesus was tempted in the desert? Just Jesus. But after it was over, did angels come and comfort him? When Jesus fought the battle against Satan on the cross, how many people were there fighting that fight? 1. But after he died and was resurrected, did angels attend to him at that point? Yeah, okay, and the same idea is happening here. So he's fighting this fight against these fallen angels, but eventually Michael is going to come. And it's hard to know for sure. Michael's an archangel. Did Michael bring his whole troop of angels under him with him to this fight, or did he come solo to this fight? It doesn't say. It could be either. But Michael's going to come in and help for a while and help Christ or Jesus so that they can win a temporary battle, so that Jesus can take leave of that responsibility and go talk to Daniel. And then it's going to tell us in a minute, once he finishes talking to Daniel, he's going to go straight back to the battle with Michael against these fallen angels. And so if you keep reading, that's the gist of what he's going to basically tell him at this point. All right, so verse 13, it says, "But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, and behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left alone there with the kings of Persia. Now I have come to make you understand what will happen to your people in the latter days, for the vision refers to many days yet to come." So when he uses the phrase latter days and days yet to come, he's not really talking so much about the temple or Jerusalem. He's talking about the kingdom of the Messiah that's going to come, okay? Some of which will include Jews, but it's not exclusive to Jews. And he's saying, I'm going to give you a vision about what's going to come down the road. And specifically, what's going to happen to God's people down the road. All right. So verse 15, it says, "When he had spoken such words to me, I turned my face toward the ground and became speechless." So he kind of does another face plant here. So verse 16, so he's going to kind of go through this multiple times where he gets really weak again, Christ strengthens him again, it kind of goes back and forth. Same idea here. So verse 16, "Suddenly one having the likeness of the sons of men," or you could just say son of man. It's the idea of the phrase of son of man, but it's just saying he looks like a son of man. "Touched my lips." So he's going to touch the lips of Daniel. Why? So that Daniel can actually speak. Okay, Daniel's too weak to even speak. The same idea happens in Ezekiel and in Isaiah, to allow those prophets to speak as well. So this is the same theme that's picked up in multiple prophets, that their lips are touched so that they are able to speak. So it says, "Then I opened my mouth and spoke, saying to him who stood before me, 'My Lord, because of the vision, my sorrows have overwhelmed me, and I have retained no strength.'" So now he's back down to no strength again. So it says, "For how can this servant of my Lord talk with you, my Lord? As for me, no strength remains in me now, nor is any breath left in me." Okay, so he's back down to zero energy. So verse 18, "Then again, the one having the likeness of a man touched me and strengthened me." So here we go, back to full restoration. And it said, "And he said, 'O man greatly beloved, fear not, peace to you, be strong, yes, be strong.'" So he actually says the same thing twice there. So this is, this same idea is said multiple times in the Old Testament. So it's said in Isaiah, it's said multiple times in Deuteronomy. So that same phrase, which is translated here, where did it go? Be strong, yes, be strong. That same concept has been said a bunch of times in the Old Testament. The idea of peace be to you, back in verse 19, this is something that so I won't get too deep into the idea of the angel of the Lord and who is the angel of the Lord and all this, but I'll just tell you, a lot of people think the angel of the Lord is the pre-incarnate Jesus. Maybe, maybe not. If it's the same individual as what we're seeing here in Daniel 10, maybe, maybe not. But anyway, that same phrase is uttered by the angel of the Lord to Gideon in Judges chapter 6. So that may tie it together, maybe not. But anyway, so it says, so in verse 19 it says, "Let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me." So verse 20, it says, "Then he said to me, 'Do you know why I have come to you?'" This is a rhetorical question. He doesn't even pause for an answer. Okay, so it's just, do you know why I've come? Obviously you don't, so I'll just go ahead and tell you. And it says, "And now I must return to fight with the prince of Persia, and when I have gone forth, indeed the prince of Greece will come." So what he's saying here is, basically, after I give you this message, I'm going to leave, and I'm going to go back, and I'm going to help Michael fight with these fallen angels some more. But then what he says is, basically he tells you straight away that, okay, once we get this problem solved with these demons and the Persia situation, there's just going to be another one pop up in Greece, okay? And we've already seen the succession of events. It's the Babylonian Empire, then the Medo-Persian Empire, then the Grecian Empire is next. And so what he's saying is, we'll put this down in Persia, but the same thing's going to pop up in Greece. And he doesn't say it, but you know what's next. After they get the situation in Greece under control, it'll pop up in Rome, and blah, 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 okay? And so as you kind of think about that, I know the topic of spiritual warfare and how it all works is a little bit uncomfortable in the church, and I'm not going to sit up here and speculate a whole bunch on that because that would probably be foolish. But it's very clear that it happened here at this time. The question is, does it still happen today? You could maybe infer that. That might be a reasonable leap to take. How does it happen? I don't know. When he's talking about, that these princes or these fallen angels are affecting the situation in Persia, does that mean that they have inhabited the body of a political leader? I don't know. Does it mean that they somehow convinced them to do certain things? It seems to mean that in some capacity. Now, does that mean that they've been possessed by a demon like you see people in the New Testament when Jesus cast out demons? Is that what that means? I don't know. Obviously, in some way, shape, or form, they had influence over certain people. And it seems to be that they have influence even over entire nations of people at times, okay? So I will just throw out a question. I don't have an answer to it. Do these same things still happen today? If so, where do you think it happens around the world? Has it happened here? If so, would that explain anything about what has been going on in our country for the last however long you want to say? I don't know the answer to that, but if it is, what is the answer for our response to that? Well, if you take it from this chapter, the most obvious thing is we need to pray about it, okay? And not a little cheap, weak prayer. It's a fall on your knees for 3 weeks, fasting and prayer kind of prayer, and humble yourself before God and pray about it. I know we have an election this fall. Does that mean that will fix everything, even if it goes the way you want it to go? Probably not. But we need to be praying about these things for our country and for our country to allow the church to operate without persecution in our country. And so that's what Daniel was doing at this time. He was praying that the people would be allowed to go back to Jerusalem, and once they're there, to be able to rebuild the temple. And those are the kind of things we need to be praying about too, is that our government will allow us to continue to do what God wants us to do in our country as his people. And if that's the case, and if there are evil influences in our country, if this same event occurs, perhaps Christ and his angels will show up and start fighting against the powers that are here. I don't want to make huge leaps here, so I don't want to say too much. But you get the idea. At a very minimum, we should be praying about these things, okay? Praying that God will help us, praying that God will help our country, and so forth. All right, so we'll finish up with the last verse, and I'll see if you guys have any questions. So verse 21, it says, "But I will tell you what is noted in the scripture of truth." This is the only time in the Bible that book is referred to. You may have a translation that says book of truth. It's not any of the other books you read about in the Bible. The book of truth, hard to know exactly what it is, but what it may be God's book where through his foreknowledge he already tells what will happen in the future. And so Christ may be referring to, I'm telling you some of the things that are in the book that will happen in the future, because I already know it's there, because it's already written down. That may be what he's alluding to. And then it goes on and says, no one upholds me against these except Michael, your prince. And so Michael here is called your prince, meaning Michael is the angel, archangel, assigned to fight for the Jewish people at that time, okay? Do we have an archangel assigned to us? Don't know the answer to that, okay? If so, I can guarantee you his name is not Uncle Sam, all right? Other than that, I don't know who he is or if there is one, all right? But that's what it's saying here, is that Michael had been assigned to them to fight for them at that particular time. Okay, I know that's kind of a lot and kind of a lot to absorb. Does anybody have any comments or questions before we wrap up? Yeah, B.
The rivalry between God and Satan began before the earth was.
Did you say rivalry or robbery?
What?
Did you say rivalry or robbery? Rivalry, okay. So B said that the rivalry between Satan and God started before the earth even began. And that's true. This has been going on a long time. We don't understand everything about it, obviously. But this is, and it will continue all the way up till Christ's return. Any other? Bart?
500 years later, roughly, after the church has been born, Paul's writing to those churches, and he makes references to powers and principalities,
Yeah,
spiritual warfare.
he does.
There's a fight ongoing that is spiritual in nature. So it's not a leap to say that it's ongoing.
Yeah, that's Ephesians. Yeah, that's Ephesians 6. I think that's a 3. No, 12. Sorry, 6:12. Couldn't read my writing. The verse Bart's alluding to is 6:12. I mean, there is still spiritual warfare. Do we fully understand how it all works? I'll just say I don't. John? I think most people use demons and fallen angels as synonyms. Yeah. So, any other comments or questions? All right. Good to see everybody.